Hi everyone, this is Andrew Prima, Ukrainian American reporting from Kiev. In today's podcast, week 127 of Russian invasion of Ukraine, and this is the second week of August 2024. In today's podcast, there is going to be one main discussion point that shook the world. Ukraine invaded the Kursk region. The deep invasion of Ukraine into the Russian Federation territory of the Kursk region becomes a turning point and opens a new page in the largest military conflict in Europe since the Second World War II. As it becomes clear every hour, starting on August 6, 2024, the current Ukrainian offensive against Western Russia in the Kursk region is not a simple episode. An expected operation by Kiev on the state territory of the Russian Federation may change the nature of the Russian Ukrainian war. Ukraine's attack is a new development, at least in five respects. So, what happened starting on August 6? First, this is a classic military offensive conducted by the official armed forces of Ukraine. Previous raids on Russian territory were carried out by small and semi regular Freedom of Russia Legion and the Russian Volunteer Corps, made up of Russian citizens fighting on the side of Ukraine. The recent land invasion of Russia, by contrast, is being carried out by large and regular Ukrainian mechanized and combined forces. This distinction has both practical and symbolic significance. The current offensive is not, like previous raids by pro Ukrainian Russian volunteers, a limited and short term attacks on the territory of Russia. This is a major Ukrainian military operation with the involvement of a significant number of personnel and the use of wide range of weapons. Previous attacks by the Legion Freedom of Russia and the Russian Volunteer Corps were also shameful for Moscow. However, in the end, they were only pinpricks or of small units with a limited number and types of weapons. Now, the regular Ukrainian army is doing to Russia in many respects what the Russian army has been doing to Ukraine since 2014. The symbolism of this new event is high, at least for Ukrainians, Russians, and other residents of the European Union. Secondly, the first day of the Ukrainian offensive against Russia turned out to be unexpectedly successful for Kiev. Ukrainian troops managed to quickly occupy more than 1,000 square kilometers of strategically important territory of the Russian state, while losing only a small number of their soldiers and equipment at the initial stage. Ukrainian troops as of today captured more than 30 settlements, including the administrative district center of Suja. Despite the fact that Suja is a small town with a population of only 5,000 people, until August 6, it was important for the Russian army as a logistics hub. The Russian oil company Gazprom measuring station is also located in Suja, through which all the remaining Russian natural gas passes and is transported overland to the European Union. This fact apparently caused a nervous reaction in European markets, where gas prices have risen sharply since August 6. So, thirdly, Ukraine's invasion of Russia on August 6 led to the largest and fastest change in the front line of the war since the liberation of Kharkiv and Kherson regions in 2022, which had been controlled by Russia for several months in the fall of 2022. Until recently, all territorial gains or losses of Russia and Ukraine was smaller and less significant than the current ones. For the first time in a long time, the map of the front between Russia and Ukraine has a significantly different look. So, fourth, Ukraine's Kursk offensive can be seen as a belated implementation of the widely discussed Ukrainian counteroffensive which stalled in 2023. A year ago, the Ukrainian retaliatory attack was unsuccessfully carried out on Ukrainian soil, while now, at least in the early stages, it is more successfully carried out on Russian soil. After the relatively deep incursion of Ukrainian forces into Western Russia, the war became less like a war of attrition and more like a mobile war again. So, fifth and the last one, and perhaps most importantly, the land war between Russia and Ukraine, with this week's Kursk offensive, has shifted from being fought almost exclusively on Ukrainian territory to being fought now on the legitimate state territories of both countries. Already, in the first days of its implementation, it became a source of confusion and distraction for Kremlin. This will be especially important if the Ukrainian advance into Russia turns out to be not just a short-term episode, but a long-term phenomenon. In this case, Kyiv's redirection of the defensive war against Russia on its territory will have not only operational or tactical, but also paradigmatic strategic significance. So, as I said before, as of today, Ukrainian troops have advanced up to 30 kilometers inside Russia in what has become the deepest and most significant incursion since Moscow began its full scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. So, Russia's defense ministry said its forces had engaged Ukrainian troops near the villages of Torpina and Obshik as the offensive in the Kursk region entered its sixth day. At the same time, President Vladimir Zelensky, who directly acknowledged the attack for the first time said that 2,000 cross-border attacks had been launched by Russia from the Kursk this summer, from the exact region which is under control of Ukrainian forces. Artillery, mortars, drones will also record missile strikes. In each such strike deserves a fair response, said President Zelensky from Kiev. Ukrainian troops have claimed to have captured dozens of settlements in the Kursk region within the last week. Also, Ukraine armed forces have already filmed themselves outside Suja at a major gas facility involved in the transit of oil gas from Russia to the EU and showed that it's fully controlled by Ukrainian army. In the Sumy region, which borders the Kursk region, people witnessed a steady stream of armored personnel, carriers, and tanks moving toward Russia. So, what is actually the goal of invading the Russian territory by Ukrainians? So, I would like to provide several reasons for the Ukraine's military intervention into the Kursk. First, information warfare. Increase the morale of Ukrainians and reduce the morale of the Russian military and civilians. Next one, humiliation. Humiliate President Vladimir Putin and thereby steer dissent against him with the Russian political, military, and economic elites. Third one, upset Russian passivity. Bring the war home to the millions of Russians who have remained passive and who have continued their lives while ignoring Russia's genocidal war against Ukraine. Another reason. So, Russia cordon sanitary. Russia unsuccessfully attempted to create a buffer zone inside the Kharkiv region. Ukraine might successfully create a cordon sanitaire in the Kursk region that would put Russian artillery beyond the range of attacking Ukrainian settlements and block supply roads to Russian forces in the Donbas region. The next one, sanctions. After the 2019 through 2024 Ukraine Russia gas transit agreement expired, Ukraine may wish to capture, control, or destroy the Suja transshipping hub for the transportation of Russian natural gas to Europe through Ukraine. pro Russian Hungary, Slovakia, and Austria, who have nearly 3 years to find alternative non Russian energy supplies, might have to change their hitherto negative policies toward Ukraine. The next reason, nuclear tit for tat. Unlikely, but Ukraine might seek to capture the Kursk nuclear power plant, laying 70 kilometers northeast of Sudzha, to use as bargaining chip for the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, which Russia has occupied since 2022. So the next reason, Russian opposition, provide the real Russian opposition represented by the Freedom of Russia League, Russian Volunteer Corps, and the Siberian Battalion, as opposed to Russian liberals who have no influence inside Russia, with a foothold to sow dissent against Putin's regime. In June of last year, Yevgeny Prigozhin, Wagner's forces, used Belgorod as a stepping stone for the offensive that nearly reached Moscow. Another reason, red lines. The operation could be an attempt to show the US fear of Russian red lines, which have led to a cautious approach to supplying Ukraine with military equipment and restricting their use inside Russia, is a myth. Next reason, pincer movement. With or without another special military operation into the Belgorod region, this operation into the Kursk region could be a pincer movement to encircle Russian troops by moving behind them on the Russian side of the border with Ukraine. And the last one, look into 2025. Ukrainian forces and Georgian volunteers have successfully broken through Russian fortifications in a combined arms operation using electronic warfare to bring down Russian communications and drones. Their military action will collect valuable experience that could be used for Ukraine's likely offensive in the spring of the next year. Then, Ukraine will be able to use F 16 jets that are unavailable for use inside Russian territory now. So, all that brings new challenges to the Kremlin. For Moscow, the new Ukrainian strategy, even with its current limited achievements, complicates further planning and waging an expansionist war against Ukraine. Taking into account what has been happening since August 6, Russia will have to keep and deploy more troops on its own rather than on Ukrainian state territory. Cancellation, prevention, and deterrence of the current Kursk and other possible Ukrainian counterattacks on Russian territory have become a new strategic task of the Russian General Staff. As a tool of Moscow's foreign policy, the Russian armed forces, until recently, were focused on conducting hostilities on foreign territories in Moldova, Georgia, Syria, Ukraine, and other countries. The exclusively offensive, interventionist, and/or irredentist period of deployment of Russian armed forces against external enemies has come to the end. So, Kiev's intentions. For Kiev, the invasion of the Kursk region is primarily a diversionary maneuver designed to tie up within Russia's western border troops that would otherwise attack, ravage, and terrorize Ukraine. In addition, the Ukrainian motivation for the attack could be to influence the internal and external affairs of Russia. Kiev is obviously trying to undermine the political reputation of the Kremlin, its propaganda strategy, and information policy, both among the Russian population and among the international community. Kiev hopes that the various Russian administrative miscellaneous miscalculations that led to Ukrainian military success on Russian soil will become a problem for Putin's authority, primarily among the Russian political elite and pro Russian groups around the world. So the Ukrainian attack once again demonstrated Russia's unexpected strategic incapacity, administrative shortcomings, and material shortages. These weaknesses were already manifested in 2022 during a successful Russian offensive on Kiev in the spring and the successful Ukrainian counteroffensive in the Kharkiv and Kherson region in the fall. The current Ukrainian operation once again undermines the popular narrative of Russia's supposed invincibility and superiority, a mirage often promoted in support of the Russian Empire with Ukrainian territorial concession to end the war. So, the new recklessness and riskiness of Ukrainian behavior in the war is not so much a reaction to Russian aggressiveness as a result of timidity or lack of global aid for Ukraine, which has been going on for 30 months. Iraq's annexation of Kuwait in 1990 was quickly reversed by international coalition. In the 1990s, Serbian irredentism, after some hesitation, was decisively suppressed with the help of NATO. In contrast, the international support of the affected Ukrainian state for 10 years was not only indirect but also materially weak, and this despite such scandalous events as Russian annexation of Crimea on March 2014, or the downing of Malaysian flight MH17 on July 2014 with 280 people, including 80 children on board. Western economic sanctions against Russia and military and other support for Ukraine have, however, become increasingly significant since 2022. However, they remain insufficient to protect the territory, citizens, and infrastructure of Ukraine from the genocidal attack of Russia. Worse, many countries of the global south are indirectly fueling Russia's war with a trade with the aggressor. In turn, the decisions of the West to support the defense of Ukraine are adopted slowly, hesitantly, and half heartedly. After 2.5 years of death and suffering, Kiev now wants to fundamentally change the context. In the future, Kiev will continue to try to use various means to demonstrate to the international audience that the development at the end of the war remain indefinite and that the assumption of undisputed superiority of Russia is misleading. The broader geopolitical context of this Ukrainian strategy is related to possible negotiations with Kremlin on territorial issues. It could also be a preparation for a larger multilateral task, such as the proposed second major international conference on the war after the first peace summit in Switzerland in July 2024. In addition to continuing the voice morale, normative, and legal arguments, Kiev can now follow a new approach if it manages to keep the captured Russian lands, both in direct contact with Moscow and at international conferences. The Ukrainian leadership can make transactional proposals proposing the exchange of captured Russian land for annexed Ukrainian territories. No matter what the current operation of Ukraine in the Kursk region turns out to be, Kiev will continue to look for weak points along the entire perimeter of the conflict with the Russian state, as well as its allies, agents, and proxies. Thank you for listening. If you like my podcast, please share with your friends.